An Yu is a Chinese writer who was born and raised in Beijing. She studied creative writing in New York City, and now she lives in Hong Kong, and she writes all of her fiction in English. Her debut novel came out just a few years ago, and it was called Braised Pork. I didn't love Braised Pork. I thought it was good, but it lacked a sense of humanity as far as I remember. There was something about it that I just could not connect with on an emotional level. I'll link my original written review of that in the description, but this is her second novel, Ghost Music, and I really enjoyed this one. Ghost Music is an interesting novel in that it appears rather complex. It has a fever dream tone to it. It is surreal in places, and it reminded me of the works of Haruki Murakami, as did Braised Pork. And because this one is also about music, in a kind of superficial but also not superficial way, it reminded me of The Unconsoled by Kazuo Ishiguro. However, the book is really delightfully and satisfyingly simple. While there is a lot of feverishness and surrealism to the tone and to the events, it's actually a really simple tale that I found really satisfying for that reason. Ghost Music follows the story of Song Yan. She is a 30-ish year old woman. She's married to a guy who's originally from a small village in Yunnan, and the two of them have been married for a while, but he has brought his mother into their apartment. His mother also comes from this small village in Yunnan, and Song Yan's husband has said, look, my mother's old, can she please live with us? I will look after her, it's not fair that she lives by herself. Fine, okay. However, this mother brings with her secrets. The blurb teases that. However, these secrets actually get revealed very early in the novel, so I am going to talk about them here. Before we get there though, the book actually begins with a dream. Song Yan wakes up in a room, and there's a mushroom just growing out of the floorboards. It's a little orange mushroom like the ones on the cover, and it starts talking, and yet the voice doesn't seem to be coming from the mushroom, but just sort of the room in general. And it tries to tell our protagonist something. It's not very clear what it is, and of course we know we're probably going to return to this mushroom at some point. Then begins the story that I've just described to you. Song Yan is living with her husband. He's very busy, he's always at work, working for some car company in Beijing, and so his mother is kind of left in the care of our protagonist. But Song Yan also works as a piano teacher. Her father was a pretty successful pianist. She was raised as a pianist herself and ended up becoming a piano teacher when she didn't really make it on her own. It's quickly revealed to her that she doesn't know as much about her husband as she thought she did when his mother reveals the fact that her son actually had a sister. Until this point, Song Yan thought that her husband was an only child, but actually he has a sister who is presumably out there somewhere, and his mother reveals that she had to give his sister up when she was only 3 years old. And so that immediately sets up a kind of mystery. Either we're going to learn more about this sister, we're going to maybe follow a journey to find out where she is, or maybe we'll just learn more about the family, because we've already got one secret revealed. What else is there? And at this same moment, Song Yan receives a package. Assuming that the package came from someone by mistake, it's not meant for her and her family, but she opens it up, and it's a bunch of mushrooms. And then this keeps happening. Over and over again, on a weekly basis, they are sent a package of mushrooms, and they're always different mushrooms, and the mother-in-law usually knows what they are and says that they come from somewhere around where she grew up, a very mountainous region in the north of China, and apparently like a third of the world's mushrooms actually grow there. And then there are two more mysteries. There was a world-famous pianist that Song Yan hugely looked up to, who disappeared several years ago, and his family have since presumed him dead. But he plays a part in this story somehow. And then there's the fact that it turns out, and again we learn this very early on, Song Yan's husband actually had a wife before he moved to Beijing that he never mentioned. And at the same moment that we learn about her, we also learn that his hometown is being covered in some orange stuff. It looks like pollen, and it is gradually coating the entire village. Rooftops, the ground, the river, everything is just turning orange, looking like the surface of Mars. All of these things are interconnected, either narratively and physically, or in some spiritual, metaphorical, thematic way. And it all seems pretty complex at first, and again, it reminds me of a Murakami novel, and as the story goes on and the surrealism builds, again, it reminds me of The Unconsoled. But this is, at its heart, a very simple tale about family, about marriage, about our struggles with one another. Pretty much every strange and surreal, feverish thing that happens in the novel can be traced back to our protagonist and her relationship to her husband, his to his mother, and all of theirs to their own pasts and their futures. And you see how these things represent certain aspects of love, childhood, parenthood, lots of different relatable things, which means at its core, Ghost Music is a beautiful novel about our struggles with one another, especially in an intimate setting, as friends, as family members, and most importantly, as lovers. So you've got a lot of strange pieces that very clearly connect to one another and reveal a very intimate tale. And I find that really, really satisfying. Sometimes when you read more surrealist fiction, you can see the threads, you can see how it's all bound together and what it all represents and what the point of it is, and sometimes you can't. And either way, it doesn't necessarily matter. Some things are surreal and strange and even scary for the sake of it, and I often really enjoy that stuff, but it's nice to read something that so obviously has a thematic core, has a heart beating at the center of it, that I find satisfying and therefore gives the book a sense of love. The protagonist has love. She wants a child, and her husband just kind of refuses to talk about it. There are things he's hiding, and there are things that she very simply and honestly just wants out of life. There are things that she regrets, there are things that she missed out on, and there are things that she's hoping for in her future. And I find it all very relatable. The surrealism adds a layer of complexity to it, but doesn't distract from the love, from the want, from the character herself. I really appreciate all of that. I think it is deft writing. At its heart, this is a book about character and about relationships. Why not sprinkle in surrealism as a way of explaining the thematic notes of the novel? It's clever stuff, and it makes it more dynamic and interesting and exciting and sometimes strange and unsettling. Great. But it remains a simple, satisfying piece of literary fiction, beautifully written. I love the journeys around Beijing. I love the little cultural flickers here and there of things like food and the streets, and the mention of things like fashion and work culture, little things that just make you feel like you're in Beijing. As I said, I didn't love the author's first novel, Braised Pork, but this feels like her refining, honing, and kind of simplifying her craft. Taking something large scale and just cutting the fat, just slicing it down, making it smaller, more intimate, more focused. And I think Ghost Music, as a result, is a beautiful, intimate, surrealist piece of literary fiction. And I found it really, really satisfying, and it tugged at my heartstrings an awful lot. I couldn't always relate to the protagonist, but God, I felt for her. And that takes real talent, which Anu absolutely has. So if Ghost Music interests you, check it out. I really, really enjoyed it. It's also nice and short, at a little over 200 pages. I read it in 2 days, and I was very satisfied by it. Check it out, and subscribe for books.